Okay, the recording is on and we are ready to start. Okay, so yesterday we learned about those that are prohibited from being metame, yet if there's a mitzvah involved, they're mechuyev to be metame. The Gemara was discussing who should be metame first when there's different types of people with different types of yisurim. So the Gemara said, first the Mishnah said that if there's a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir walking down the street and they encounter a Chman L'Tzla and a Meis Mitzvah, it's a machlokes. Is it better for the Kohen Gadol to be metame because his violation doesn't require him to bring a korban, or is it better that the Nazir should be metame because the Nazir's kedusha is not permanent kedusha? Then the Gemara discussed the difference between a Mashuach, the Shemin HaMishcha, a Kohen Gadol who was from the earlier Kohanim in the first base of Mikdash before Yosy hid away the Shemin HaMishcha, and versus a Meruba Begadim. So the Gemara says, since a Mashuach, the Shemin HaMishcha, has an extra halacha that he brings a par, Habal Kol Mitzvahs, he shouldn't be metame, rather than Meruba Begadim should be metame. Then there was a discussion between Mashuach Sha'avar and a Meruba Begadim. That the Gemara said the Meruba Begadim should not be metame because he's doing avodah, while the Mashuach Sha'avar is not doing avodah. Then we had the difference between someone who's not able to do avodah one day versus someone who can't do avodah for multiple days. Tumas Keri versus the Mum, and the Gemara says avada, the person who's only disabled from doing the avodah one day, he shouldn't be metame, the other one should be. Then there's the question of the Meshuch Muhammad, the Skan, which is the person who would take over should the Kohen Gadol be disqualified on Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says that the Meshuch Muhammad is the one who should become Tameh and not the Skan, because the Skan is needed for Avodah. Even though if it was a question of saving one, you would save the Meshuch Muhammad first, because the Tzibur needs him to fight their wars. Then the Gemara says, how do you know? What is this makar that a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir, they are allowed to be metame for a Meis Mitzvah? They're clearly prohibited from becoming tameh, even to a close relative. So where do you see this carve out in the Torah to allow them to be metame to a Meis Mitzvah? So the Gemara said, first let's tackle Kohen Gadol. In the parasha of Kohen Gadol, which we know must be referring to more than just what a Kohen Hedyot cannot be metame to. We know a Kohen Hedyot cannot be metame to Rechoikim. He could only be metame to a 7 Kohen. Yet the Torah says there's an enhanced level of kedusha on the Kohen Gadol, which would then prohibit the Kohen Gadol from being metame to his own relatives. Yet, even though it says Al Kol Nafesh Meis Lo, which we would automatically interpret to forbid a Kohen Gadol from being metame to his relatives, the Torah sought to itemize la'aviv u'la'imir lo yitama, which are extra words. So from the word la'aviv lo yitama, we learn davka to his father, he shouldn't become tamei, but he could be tamei to a Meis Mitzvah. So now we know the makar of why a Kohen Gadol may and should be metame to a Meis Mitzvah. It's because we're medayik from the extra word la'aviv. Davka la'aviv, he shouldn't become tamei, but to a Meis Mitzvah he would become tamei, which took us to the bottom of that Mem Zayin Amud Beis. Now we have an extra word, le'imoy, because in the pasuk of Kohen Gadol it says la'aviv u'le'imoy lo yitama, both la'aviv and le'imoy are extra. La'aviv is used to tell us that a Kohen Gadol could be metame to a Meis Mitzvah, and le'imoy, that's what we're starting with today. The very first word on Daf Mem Chesam Aleph, le'imoy, is l'gzeres shava, is to create a gzeres shava between Kohen Gadol and Nazir. Kohen Gadol and Nazir are very similar in the fact that both of them are prohibited to become tamei, even to a close relative. Rebbe made a gzeir shava from the word imoy stated by Kohen Gadol to the word imoy stated by Nazir. Let's just see if we could find the pasuk by Nazir that it says by a Kohen Gadol, "V'al kol nafsho meis lo yavoi le'aviv u'l'imay lo yitama." And by Nazir it says, "Kol yimei hazirai lashem al nefesh meis loyavoy la'aviv u'le'imay la'achav u'la'achoysha lo'yitam la'hebeboisam kinezah la'kol ha'roishay." So as you can see, you could already see from this pasuk what the Gemara is going to be talking about. By Kohen Gadol, we have the extra word la'aviv and the extra word le'imay. By Nazir, we have the extra word la'aviv, le'imay, la'aviv u'la'achoysha. So we're going to have 4 chedushim that we're going to learn on Amud Beis related to Nazir, because of the 4 extra words. But we're focusing now on the Ula Imai by Nazir and the Ula Imai by Kohen Gadol. The Tanya we learned. Rabbi Omer Gabi Nazir, it says b'moisam. So let's have a look. It says over here, Loi yitame lahem b'moisam. Don't become tummy to them when they're dead. Well, when else would you think you should not be metama to them? Zogt Rebbe, b'moisam ein metama, av metama hu l'negam u'l'zivasam. If there's somebody who has a nega, or someone's a zov, they're also tummy. They're not a maze, but they're tummy. A nazir is not prohibited from becoming tummy by touching a zov or by touching a mitzvah. That's a halacha that we know applies to nazir. But since you have Gzera Shava le'imoi, will apply that halacha to Kohen Gadol as well. A Kohen Gadol is allowed to come in contact with someone that has a nega, with a mitzvah, and the Kohen Gadol is allowed to come into contact with a zov or a zova, even though he'll become tummy. It's only tumas meis that he's prohibited from. Vainly el b'nazir, el b'nazir. I only know this halacha of b'moisam ein matama of matama hu l'negam l'zivasam. I only know that applies to a nazir. The Kohen Gadol minayin. How do I know this halacha by a Kohen Gadol? So this is where we have our Gzera Shava. Amrit, we said, Lo yoymar imay b'Kohen Gadol. It doesn't need to say imay b'Kohen Gadol. She'ein tamad loymar. We already know that a Kohen Gadol is prohibited to become tummy to his mother. Sharei kal v'chomer. It's a kal v'chomer. An interesting kal v'chomer here. We're highlighting the value of a paternal relationship versus a maternal relationship. Uma'im b'mokim shekohen hedit b'tamal la'achim. Madach, in a place where we see a highlighted relationship, where a kohen hedit is allowed to be matama to his brother. That a kohen hedit can be matama to his brother, that's only if he shares a father with that brother. But if he only shares a mother with that brother, a kohen may not be matama to such a brother. So umam b'mokim shekohen hedit matama is la'achiv me'aviv. Nevertheless, ein kohen gadol matama la'aviv. A Kohen Gadol cannot be matama to his father, as the pasuk says, "La'aviv u'imay lo yitama." Makom she'ein kohen hedit matama la'achiv. But in a place where a kohen hedit would not be able to be matama to his brother, because that's called too distant a relationship to allow him to be matama, which is me'imay if he only shares a mother with that father. Einay din she'ein kohen gadol matama la'imay. Clearly, you see that a paternal relationship is stronger than a maternal relationship. So if we know that a Kohen Gadol cannot be matama to his father, we would surely know in Svara that a Kohen Gadol cannot be matama to his mother. Im zachisa me'adin. So if that's the case, if I would have known from the fact that a Kohen Gadol cannot be matama to his father, that he surely cannot be matama to his mother, ma tamad leimer imay b'Kohen Gadol. Why did the Torah need to itemize ula imay lo yitama by a Kohen Gadol? Mufne, it must be. It's a completely extra and redundant word to use for a Gzera Shava. Lahakish v'lodin heimenu Gzera Shava. Nemar imay b'nazir. It says imay b'nazir. V'nemar imay b'Kohen Gadol, and it says imay by Kohen Gadol. Ma imay hamer b'nazir. Just like imay where it says by nazir. It's dafke b'moisam ein matama. He only is prohibited from becoming tummy to a mace. Aval metam hu l'negam l'zivasam. But another tumah that comes from a person. A nazir is not prohibited from being matama. Af imay ha'amar b'Kohen Gadol. So too the word imay that says by Kohen Gadol, b'moisam ein matame. A Kohen Gadol is only prohibited to become a tumas meis. Aval mitame l'negam l'zivasam. But a Kohen Gadol is allowed to become tamei to a live tamei like a mitzvah or a zava. So let's just do an accounting of what we've learned so far. We've learned from Aviv that a Kohen Gadol is allowed to be metama to a meis mitzvah. And we learned from Imai an important halacha from Nazir that a Kohen Gadol, as well as a Nazir, of course, are allowed to be kamtame from a Mitzvah and from a Zov, because by Nazir it says b'moisa. Now, the Gemara, Kohen Gadol. So we've now found a makar, a source, that a Kohen Gadol is allowed to be mitama to a Meis Mitzvah. Nazir minalan. How do we know that a Nazir could be mitama to a Meis Mitzvah? So this is where Avigdor usually would ask, didn't we just say that you have Gzeir Shava from Nazir to Kohen Gadol? And we already established from the word Aviv by Kohen Gadol that a Kohen Gadol is allowed to be mitama to a Meis Mitzvah. So shouldn't the Gzeir Shava, shouldn't the Gzeir Shava of Nazir to Kohen Gadol, just like we're using it to export from Nazir to Kohen Gadol, that you can be matama to a Zav and a Mitzvah, why don't we use it as well to export from Kohen Gadol back to Nazir, that you can be matama from Meis Mitzvah? Why do we need a special pasuk for it, which the Gemara is going to about to offer? So that's what our problem is now. Why can we not use the Gzeir Shava to go both ways? If we have a Gzeir Shava between Nazir and Kohen Gadol, and we already have a makar by Kohen Gadol that is allowed to be matama to a Meis Mitzvah, why do we need a specific makar by Nazir? Why can't you just learn it from Kohen Gadol? That is problem number one. So we're going to hold a place in the Gemara, and we're going to slide down into Tosfos, who asks this question and answers it. So we're in the fourth wide line of Tosfos, towards the end of the line. Excuse me. Excuse me. Okay. Ashkechana Kohen Gadol the mitamal b'svitz and nosim nolim. Tema frek the Gemara. Typically Gzeir Shava the imai the same Gzeir Shava where we learned from Nazir to Kohen Gadol that they're allowed to be matama to a Nazir and a Mitzvah. Use that same Gzeir Shava to teach us from Kohen Gadol to Nazir that he can be matama to a Meis Mitzvah. Kamoy shanu loim dim Kohen Gadol mi Nazir. Leading the gam v'zivasam hachanami nahader v'neilif Nazir mi Kohen Gadol leading Meis Mitzvah. Then Gzeir Shava l'mechza. There's no such thing as a half Gzeir Shava. Once you compare the two, they're compared completely. Near l'maraf. So the maraf is old. I'm good. It was a dry sneeze. Thank you very much. Ilav de nafkalon Meis Mitzvah b'Nazir. If it wasn't for the fact that we would have had a special pasuk by Nazir that says by Nazir Gufa that he's allowed to be matama to a Meis Mitzvah, mikra achil from different pasuk. Havamina, you know what I would have said? The chuluk Gzeir Shava the imay ashil Meis Mitzvah. Yes, I would have used the Gzeir Shava to teach you Meis Mitzvah, but I would have never known the other halacha that we're using the Gzeir Shava for, and that is that a Kohen Gadol can be matama to a Zav and a Mitzvah. Why not? Don't you say Ein Gzeir Shava l'mechza? Learn everything. So Tosfos is a huge chiddush. Aval inyan lemutei nagam v'zivasam bein b'kohen hedyet ubein b'kohen Gadol kivan the Mitzvah iskish lemeis. Since the Mitzvah is hukash to a mace, he's considered just like a mace. The haveleka oiker krab mimashmu usay odek Gzeir Shava. If you have him a fourish pasuk, you're not going to be oiker that with the Gzeir Shava. Gzeir Shava teaches you unknown halachas, but Gzeir Shava won't tell you to ignore a mafurish halacha in the pasuk. The Gemara says if it wasn't for the fact that the Gzeir Shava was so to speak extra, that you don't need it to teach you anything else, you would not have applied it to teach you that a Kohen Gadol is allowed to be matama to a Mitzvah, because maybe a Mitzvah is like a mace, and therefore we wouldn't use a Gzeir Shava to permit it. But now that we found another source by Nazir that a Nazir may be matama to a Meis Mitzvah, we have an extra Gzeir Shava. What are we going to use it for? It must be to tell us something that we would have otherwise not applied the Gzeir Shava to tell us that even though a Mitzvah is like a mace, nevertheless a Kohen Gadol is still allowed to be matama to a Mitzvah as well as to a Zava, which Tosfos says is not really the main focus. It's the Mitzvah that's the main focus. Gewaltig. So now we have our answer. So now we know why we need to find an independent makar by Nazir that a Nazir is allowed to be matama to a Kohen Gadol, which gets us into a long brisa that goes through the pasuk of Nazir in detail. To a Meis Mitzvah as well as to a Zav and a Mitzvah. So Nazir Minala, and right now we want to know the Makor by Nazir, that a Nazir is allowed to be Matama from Beis Mitzvah. The Tanya. And this is a long brisa that goes through the whole pasuk. So once again, let's review the pasuk by Nazir. Kol Yimei Haziroi Lashem Al Nefesh Meis LaYavoy. And then there's 4 pratim: LaAviv, UleImai, LaAchiv, UleAchoisoi, LaYitama Lahem B'Moisa. Zok the Heilige brisa. Kol Yimei Haziroi Lashem Al Nefesh Meis LaYavoy. Shemei Ani. From the pasuk of Al Nefesh Meis LaYavoy, Afilu Nefesh Behema. A behema sometimes is referred to as a nefesh as well. Afilu Nefesh Behema b'mashma. Does that mean that a nazir wouldn't even be able to become tamei by touching a nevela? Can you shenemer makan nefesh behema? Talmud Loimer, the pasuk has to tell you that of course a nazir is allowed to come into contact with a behema. It's just a nefesh mace that he cannot, a human mace that he cannot come in contact with. Talmud Loimer al nefesh mace lo yavoy. When it says nefesh mace, that's benefesh adam hakasef medaber. And Tosfos tells us that even though the word nefesh could apply to a behema, like it says makin nefesh behema, but the word nefesh mace never refers to a behema, that only refers to an adam. So that's how we know that the prohibition for a nazir to become tamei is only to an adam. Rabbi Shmuel Loimer einay tzarich. I don't need the extra word of mace. Even from the regular pasuk of al mace lo yavai, even if it didn't say al nefesh mace, no, even if it would have said al nefesh lo yavai, and even if it would have omitted the word mace, I would still have known that it's referring to a human. How would I have known? Because I read omer lo yavai. It says lo yavai. Lo yavai indicates that it's not just touching the mace that's going to make you tamei. It's even coming in to an oil that this mace is found in. So we're only speaking about something that creates tumah b'oil. So therefore, so just because the word says al nefesh lo yavoy, that's proof positive that we're speaking about a human, because we're speaking about only a tumah that is transmitted by oil. Okay, so now we got past the first line of the pasuk. Kol Yemer Zir Lashem al nefesh meis lo yavoy. The Torah is telling us a nazir cannot become a tumas mace, but only the tumas mace of a human, not tumas nevela. Now we'll get into the 4 pratim. La'aviv hu le'imai einay metamei av metamei hu le'meis mitzvah. So here we have our pasuk telling us that you can be metamei le'meis mitzvah. So right off the bat, you're going to ask me, why do I need la'aviv hu le'imai? By Kohen Gadol, we said from la'aviv alone, we learn that since la'aviv is extra, we learn that you can be metamei le'meis mitzvah. What's the la'aviv hu le'imai? So Tosfos tells us that la'aviv and uleimai are both wrong. We actually do not learn avol metamahu l'meis mitzvah from la'aviv uleimai. We actually learn from la'achiv. But the Bryce is just introducing this pasuk. From this pasuk in general, we're going to go through it in detail, and we're going to illustrate that a nazir is allowed to be metama to a meis mitzvah. And now the Gemara, the Bryce starts drilling down on the details. Ad shelo yoimar. Even if the pasuk would not have itemized la'aviv uleimai, yesh li bedin, I would have known it from a svara that a nazir may not be metameh to his father or his mother. Why? Uma kohen gadol shekedushas kedushas olam. Ma decha kohen gadol. I'm sorry. Actually, yomer that a nazir could be metameh to a meis mitzvah. I would have known it when I svara. Uma kohen gadol shekedushas kedushas olam. Mitameh la meis mitzvah. Ma decha kohen gadol. That has a kedushas olam. Nazir she'ein kedushas kedushas olam ein din she'mitamel meis mitzvah. Surely a nazir can be mitamel to meis mitzvah. We should remember this svara, because this is the same svara that the Mishnah used when the Mishnah said that if a nazir and a kohen gadol come upon a meis mitzvah, it's the nazir that should become tamei and not the kohen gadol, because the kohen gadol's tumah, the kohen gadol's iser is kedushas forever. So we're reusing that same svara. Right? There's another way to look at it. Lo yimamrit b'kohen gadol shekein einay may be carbon al tamasai. A kohen gadol's kedusha is not so severe. Why? Because even if a kohen gadol becomes tamei, he doesn't bring a carbon. Tamer b'nazir she may be carbon al tamasai. This was also a svara the Mishnah said. The kohen gadol becomes tamei? No, he doesn't. If he goes into the Beis Hamikdash, if he touches karbonis, but if he himself becomes tummy, there's no carbon that a Kohen Gadol brings to become tummy. It's a lav. Okay, Malchus. Zok to Gemara. So therefore, Hoyelu maybe carbon al Tomosai, maybe because a Nazir is chomer and it brings a carbon al Tomosai, maybe lo yitam base mitzvah. You wouldn't know logically just because we have a makar by Kohen Gadol that he could be metama to a base mitzvah. Maybe a Nazir is more chomer and a Nazir cannot be metama to a base mitzvah. Tamad loimer lo avivu le imoy lo yitama aval metama lo base mitzvah. So that's one way to look at it. Again, this is not going to be the maskana of the brisa. This is still a developing story. Maybe. I'm sorry. We for sure don't need both. Right. So the Gemara is going to go through the lemudim from each word. Look at this. This is a fakert asfar. Maybe the Torah is telling you you cannot be metamet to kroivim, but maybe to rechoikim you could be metamet. Isn't that a counterintuitive svar? Maybe the Torah is telling you a chiddush by Nazir that you are allowed to be metamet to strangers. It's only to kroivim that you cannot be metamet to. What in the world would justify such a Moshe Kapoyedik svara? So Tosfos says there's a very good reason for it. Zog Tosfos lekach kasiv ave ve'imay loy malach the mutter letar l'shar mesim. 1 second. What would the svara be that a Nazir should be able to be metamet to rechoikim, not to kroivim? The shema kroivim azir rachmanam ipnei shemeitzer aleim. We don't want this Nazir who's on the high madrig of kedusha to be in a sad, depressed state that he will get into if he's oisik in the nifter of his close relative. V'zeu dilusa the Nazir dikri kadosh. You know what you see clearly from this pasuk, that an important element of kedusha is simcha, and it's not just a bad thing to be sad. It's actually a chesron in kedusha. Kedusha only is with simcha. Is you see clearly. Okay, so let me just finish and you'll tell us. Maybe in fact there is no iser for a Nazir to become to a stranger where his simcha will not be as impacted. Also, Chaim has a story to illustrate how kedusha is directly related to simcha. By the way, was the Abdu of a Kohen? Was not right? Okay. Okay. I figure, can you hear? Oh, okay. Tatat, we need money.
I can hear you. I can't hear Chaim.
You poor children are going to eat. Tell my husband he needs to get a job. I didn't have a job. I couldn't find what to do. Right. Yeah, but he didn't have it a weekly also not. They gave him pigeon already. Uh-huh. So how does it show that Simcha? How does it show Simcha brings to Kedusha? I hear. Okay, very good. So let's see the Gemara right here. Yep. Okay, so let's see the Gemara right here. So now our question is, how do you know that La'avav L'imai is telling you anything about Mitzvah? Maybe it's telling me that you're only allowed to be Matama to other people, but you're not allowed to be Matama to Kravim, because, like Tosha says, it makes you sad. So we still have a Kaimer. A Kal V'Chaimer. Uma Kohen Hedjit shemitame lekroivim. A Kohen Hedjit, we said, could be mitama to kroivim. Nevertheless, einay mitame l'shar mason. He cannot be mitama to rechoikim. So you clearly see that the kedusha only requires to refrain from people that are further away. So the logic is, the further away you are from that person, in relation that is, the further away you are, the more svar it is that you should not be able to be matama to them. So Madacha Kohen Hedjit, who could be matama to kroivim, yet he cannot be matama l'shar mesim. Nazir she'eini matama l'kroivim, that can't even be matama l'kroivim, einay din shelo yitama l'shar mesim. Surely he cannot be matama to shar mesim. So from Kohen Hedjit we see that the tanya that the Gemara suggested that maybe it's worse to be matama l'kroivim is faulty logic, because the Torah teaches us clearly that it's worse to be matama to rechoikim than it is to be matama to kroivim. So now, once again, what is la'avav l'imay lo yitama telling me? It must tell me, turning over on Talmud Beis, hamata b'loimer la'aviv l'imay, to teach you la'avav l'imay hu d'loi matama alva matama hu l'meis mitzvah. Zog the Gemara, weiter, why do I need to learn this? La'avav l'imay, why can't I know it from a svar? And I keep on saying the Gemara, but this is a brisa. It's a long brisa. Even if the Torah doesn't say it, yesh li bedin, I should know it from svara. Nemru klolois b'kohen gadol. It says a general rule by a kohen gadol, and Tosfos tells us what is this general rule we're talking about. Tosfos for this is on Amud Aleph. The klal is al kol nafshish meis lo yavoy. It gives a general prohibition by a kohen gadol to become tomei, and then it says v'nemru klolois b'nazir. It by Nazir it also says a lashon of al kol nefesh meis. It says kol yimei his azir l'shem al nefesh meis lo yavoy. So both of them give a generalization in the prohibition to become tamei. So let's compare the two. Maklalois hamuris b'chayin gadol la'oviv ein matame av matame l'meis mitzvah. Just like we've already established that by a kohen gadol, he may be matame to meis mitzvah. Let's apply that same principle to a nazir. Av klalois hamuris b'nazir. Let's say la'oviv ein matame av matame l'meis mitzvah. So therefore, why would I need a pasuk? Why would I need a pasuk of la'avav l'imay by Nazir to teach me that a Nazir can be matame to meis mitzvah? Why don't you know this misvara from the kohen gadol? Oy kalach l'derech zu, or maybe approach it a different way and say the following. I hear. So let's see back. Oy kalach l'derech zu. Nemru klalish b'kohen hedjit, v'nemru klalish b'nazir, ma klalish hamurish b'kohen hedjit, mitamal oviv, av klalish hamurish b'nazir, mitamal oviv. Maybe you should learn it from a kohen hedjit that in fact you could be mitama to your father. So how do you know to compare the isurim of Nazir to a kohen gadol? Maybe compare the isurim of Nazir to a kohen hedjit, and you should be allowed to be mitama to your father. Talmud leimer la'aviv l'imay lo yitama. Mitzvah mitama. It's only to the la'avav l'imay you shouldn't become tamei, but you could be mitama to a mitzvah. So this doesn't make sense because we just said a second ago you need la'avav v'le'imay la'yitama to teach you not to compare the Nazir to the Kohen Hedjit, rather compare the Nazir to the Kohen Gadol. So it's not extra. In fact, Gemara Hamiboy le'loymar she'im mitama la'avav mamish. Vital la'avav is not extra. La'avav is being used to tell you don't say a Nazir like a Kohen Hedjit, and he may be mitama to his krovim. Rather, he's like a Kohen Gadol, and he may not be mitama to his krovim. So you need la'avav. You need la'avav. Ela la'aviv is right. Loymar she'im mitame la'aviv. You need la'aviv to tell you the base halacha by Nazir, that a Nazir cannot be mitame even to his close krovim. Le'imoy, we're going to get to in a minute, but we already know what le'imoy is for. Le'imoy is the Gzera Shava. We need le'imoy for the Gzera Shava to tell us that just like by Nazir, the Nazir is allowed to be mitame to a Zov and to a Mitzvah, so to a Kohen Gadol can be mitama to a Zav and a Mitzvah. So that's la'aviv. That's la'aviv and la'imay. Now la'achiv. What does la'achiv teach you? La'achiv ein mitame halameis mitzvah mitame. So the final answer, how do we know by Nazir that he's allowed to be mitame to halameis mitzvah? It's from la'achiv. La'achiv is extra. We would have known anyway that a Nazir cannot be mitame la'achiv. The Torah says it redundantly to teach us that it's davka to a brother that he cannot be mitame to. But avada ameis mitzvah, a Nazir is allowed to be mitama. Well, the email looks there. Sorry, the aviv Nazir from the achiv, and the email, like we said a moment ago, is the Gzera Shava l'chadei Rebbe, and that teaches us that just like by Nazir, a Nazir is allowed to be mitama to a mitzvah, so to a Kohen Gadol can be mitama to a mitzvah. So now we still have the fourth word. We did la'aviv, we did la'imay, we did la'achiv. Now we just need to know why the Torah says la'achoisai by another. Well, la'achoisai leched the Tanya. The Tanya we learned la'achoisai. Matam adloimer. Why do I need the pasuk to say that a Nazir cannot be matama la'achoisai? Zokt the Bryce as follows: Hareisha halach lishchot is pischot. Someone's going to shechtless carbon pesach. What is the prohibition? It's interesting. Normally, for an isser that you're not allowed to do, that you're over, you get courage. One may not eat chaylev. If one eats chaylev, he's chayav courage. One may not eat on Yom Kippur. If he eats Yom Kippur, he's chayav courage. There's also certain assays. If you don't do this assay, you're chayav courage. There's two assays that if you don't do them, you're chayav courage. You know what those two assays are? Which two assays that if you don't do them, you're chayav courage?
Korban Pesach, Bris Milah.
Oh, Bris Milah and Korban Pesach. So now we're going to pile it all on. He was going to shechtless carbon pesach, and if he becomes tamei and he can't shechtless carbon pesach, there's an isur kares or v'lomalas b'noi. So we're stacking up the cards against becoming tamei. Don't become tamei because otherwise you won't be able to bring your carbon pesach and you won't be able to mal your son. V'shama shameis lemeis. But he heard that there's a mace there that he has to take care of, one of his relatives, and we're talking about a Nazir. And I think a Kohen Gadol as well. So he has every reason in the world why he's not allowed to become Tamei. Yochel Yitame, you might think he should become Tamei. It's his relative. Amrit lo Yitame. He can't be Mitame because a Nazir and a Kohen Gadol cannot be Mitame. Yochel lo Yitame l'meis mitzvah. You might also think that he's not allowed to become Tamei even for a mitzvah. Tamadomer lachoisai. Lachoisai tells you that dafka lachoisai who the einem Mitame halameis mitzvah Mitame. So the Lachoshi tells you that no matter what is stacked up against you becoming Tamei, there's every reason in the world not to become Tamei. And in fact, you shouldn't become Tamei for your closest relative. But for a Meis Mitzvah, it trumps everything, and you're still supposed to become Tamei. Rabbi Kiva has a whole different approach to this pasuk. And he says, let me just quickly look at the Bach. Rabbi Kiva Omer, al nefesh. Al nefesh, elu harachaykim, meis elu akroivim. So Rabbi Kiva already knows before the word la'aviv. Up until now, we were using la'aviv to tell you that you cannot be metame to your close relatives. Rabbi Kiva knows it from the words of the pasuk even before it says those four pratim. Nafshes is rechaykim and meis is akroivim. So now, according to Rabbi Kiva, we need to find a use for the la'aviv u'la'imai la'achiv u'la'achayis. So the Torah, the Brisa tells us, la'aviv u'la'imai ein matame, avo matamahu l'meis mitzvah, la'achiv is im haya Kohen Gadol, vihu Nazir, if he's a Kohen Gadol and he's a Nazir, la'achiv einu matama, ava matama hu l'meis mitzvah. And la'choisoi is l'chedetanya, harei shaya harlech l'shcha, this pischoi v'la malas panoi, meaning the stakes are higher and higher. There's not just an Isser, there's also the Pesach and the Milah, even though everything's there. Nevertheless, you're still allowed to be mitama to a meis mitzvah. Gewaltig. Okay. Now we still have a problem. According to Rabbi Kiva, because Rabbi Kiva just told us that la'avav v'limai tells you meis mitzvah. You don't need both, only you need one. So Tosha is going to say, don't worry about it. The Gemara is going to go through, according to Rabbi Kiva Shita, what each of these four words are needed to. Frank the Gemara, Rabbi Kiva Gzer Shabbat Rabbi Minale. He's clearly using Avav V'Imai for something else. We're going to have to see what he uses it for. But he's not using it for the Gzer Shabbat that Rabbi Shmuel used it from. So if that's the case, what did we use the Gzer Shabbat for? What did Rabbi use the Gzer Shabbat for? To teach you that by a Kohen Gadol, he could be Metama to a Mitzvah. Well, how is Rabbi Kiva going to know that? Amar lach, Kiva the Amar Mar, Imaya Kohen Gadol, Nazir, La'achav Einim Metama, Avol Metama Hu L'meis Mitzvah. Once Rabbi Kiva learned from this pasuk that both of them are similar in that they can both be Metama to Meis Mitzvah, I would say, Mali Kohen Gadol L'chudei, Mali Nazir v'Kohen Gadol. Regardless who they are, there shouldn't be a difference that you could be metama to a meis mitzvah. Well, the Rabbi Yishmael, and according to Rabbi Yishmael, Kohen Gadol v'hu Nazir minolei. How does the Rabbi Yishmael know that if it's both together, you're also allowed to be metama to a meis mitzvah? Maybe just one or the other. So, even the Shara Rachmana chad lav gabe meis mitzvah mali chad lav mali train lavin. The Torah was matter one lav, either if he's a Kohen Gadol alone or if he's a Nazir alone. So, oy bezoi, two lavin that come together, if he's both a Kohen and a Nazir together, it's a svara to say that the Meis Mitzvah should still trump that. Achoisoi lamali. What does Rabbi Shmuel use for achoisoi? We never explained what he learned from achoisoi. So Gedayta Chamina Kishar Rachmana Lo Meis Mitzvah is Nazir v'Kohen Disalavi. Maybe what did the Torah allow you to become Tomei if you're violating Allah? Avamilu Pesach, the Koris, which the stakes are much higher. Maybe Lo Yitam Meis Mitzvah, Kamash Malon Achoisoi, that even when the stakes are so high that you're dealing with an Isser of Koris. Gewaltig. So I don't have clear yet, according to Rabbi Kiva, where do you have the Gzer Shavah from? How does he know this halacha of Nazir Mitzvah? So let's see Tosfos inside to explain this. For Rabbi Kiva, Gzer Shavah the Rebbe, Minale, Pirish, the Lekahaf Noaklau. He used all of the words in the pasuk for something, and if it's not Pani, you cannot with Gzer Shavah. Dani Prati the Nazir, Darshin and Lakulu. He used them to build up this halacha that you can be Tam Meis Mitzvah no matter what's going on. So at this point, when the Gemara asked, according to Rabbi Kiva, how do you know the Gzer Shavah? Because you don't have anything extra. The Gemara was assuming there's no extra word imai by Nazir and there's no extra word imai by Kohen Gadol. Umashani. And now the Gemara answers, there is an extra word imai according to Rabbi Kiva. Kiva the Amar Mar, which is Rabbi Kiva, la'achiv, the im hayu Kohen Gadol ben Nazir, la'achiv ein matama, abu matama lo meis mitzvah, mehasha tebek lo mehacha. Therefore, I will know from here the Kohen Gadol va'afilu Nazir matama lo meis mitzvah, v'chol shkein Kohen Gadol greater. Right? He built up in the pasuk of Nazir that no matter how many factors are there telling you shouldn't become tamei, nevertheless, for a meis mitzvah, you should become tamei. Once he knows that, now he has the extra word imay by Kohen Gadol, because he's learning from the pasuk of Nazir. He's learning from the pasuk of Nazir that a Kohen Gadol is allowed to be metamet to a meis mitzvah. So now the la'aviv u'le'imay by Kohen Gadol is extra. But tzarich l'michtav shneim aviv u'imay by Kohen Gadol. And the question is, if both aviv and imay are extra by Kohen Gadol, Why do you need both of them? You only need Imay for the Gzer Shava. Why do you need Aviv? Zokt, the Tosfos could Aviv the Kaman Trichasa, the Nazir, we're soon going to make a Trichasa by Nazir, Le Rabbi Kiva, may Aviv Imay. Why you need both Aviv and Imay? May Aviv Imay the Nazir, Hachanami boy the Meva Trichasa, may Aviv Imay the Kohen Gadol. So we're going to see why you need Aviv Imay, why both of them have to be listed, and we'll see that tomorrow. Greg Tosfos, so all you've proven is that the word Imay is extra by Kohen Gadol, but the word isn't extra. The word Imay isn't extra by Nazir, because Rabbi Kiva is using that to build up all the different reasons why you shouldn't become Tamei, yet you could still become Tamei for a Meis Mitzvah. Dilabu Nazir Tzarech LaMeis Mitzvah. Yeshleimar Desfir Rabbi Kiva that Mufna Mitzadechad LaMeidin VeMeshivim. We always nemon that if you have a Gzer Shava and only one of the two psukim are extra, you can slug up that Gzer Shava, and here you have an upslug. Maybe only Nazir could be Mitamat HaMeis because Nazir is not permanent, while a Kohen Gadol is permanent. Rabbi Kiva might hold that if you have one pasuk extra, it's ein meshivim. According to Rabbi Shmuel, you need that Imay should be extra both by Nazir as well as by Kohen Gadol. The Yulat Perkam Apelos, the Sfirle, the maiden Umeshivin by a Gzer Shava that's not extra in both places. Gavaldik. So we were able to finish the whole blot. Now we have a couple of extra minutes. We have 5 extra minutes, so we might as well learn some extra Tosfos, because there's a lot of little details that Tosfos that the Tosfos clarifies a little bit in the Gemara. So let's go back to Amud Aleph and see some of these Tosfos. So let's just quickly do a review so that we have what we're holding on to, and then we'll learn Tosfos. So we're looking for a makar. This Gemara all started off. We were looking for a makar by Nazir as well as by Kohen Gadol that they could be mitame to a Meis Mitzvah. So the Gemara started off by saying that the word la'aviv by Kohen Gadol is extra because it says Akol Nafshish Meis Lo Yavoi. That whole pasuk is extra because every Kohen Hedget cannot become tamei to a Meis. The fact that the Torah says by Kohen Gadol Akol Nafshish Meis Lo Yavoi, it must be referring to a higher level of kedusha, which would obviously mean that a Kohen Gadol is prohibited even from being Tamei to those people that a Kohen Gadol, that a Kohen Hedget is allowed to become Tamei to, such as the Kroivim. So I already know that even the Kroivim of a Kohen Gadol, he may not be Metamei to. So why does the Torah have to itemize Aviv and Imay? So the Gemara said, Aviv tells you that it's only to his father that he can't be Metamei, but he could be Metamei to a Meis Mitzvah. So now we found a makor by Kohen Gadol that he could be Metamei to a Meis Mitzvah. Le'imay is extra. Le'imay we use for Gzer Shava, with which we import information from Nazir. And the Gemara is working here with Rabbi Shmuel that Imay is extra by Kohen Gadol, and Imay is also extra by Nazir. And there's a halacha that we learn from Nazir that the only type of tumah that a Nazir is prohibited from coming in contact with is tumas meis. It says b'moisam, only when they're dead. But if someone's tumah when they're alive, such as a Mitzvah that's chashav kameis, that is not included in the prohibition. That's a halacha that we learn by Nazir. Using le'imay, we can export that from Nazir to Kohen Gadol, and that we know that a Kohen Gadol is allowed to be matame to a live tumah like a Mitzvah. That is how we know the halachas by Kohen Gadol. Now, how do we know the halachas by Nazir? And Tosfos told us that we cannot use the Gzer Shava to learn from Kohen Gadol to Nazir that a Nazir is allowed to be Metamei to a Meis Mitzvah, because if we would use the Gzer Shava for that, we would not use the Gzer Shava to tell you that a Kohen Gadol could be Metamei to a Mitzvah, because maybe a Gzer Shava wouldn't be followed if it seems to contradict the Pasuk shot in the Pasuk, and if we would consider a Mitzvah like a Meis, that would sort of be first in the Pasuk that a Kohen Gadol cannot be Metamei to a Mitzvah. The only way we can apply the Gzer Shava to tell us that a Kohen Gadol is allowed to be Metamei to a Mitzvah is only if we don't have any other purpose for the Gzer Shava, so we're forced to use it to teach us that a Kohen Gadol could be Metamei to a Mitzvah. That was the first half of what we learned. And then we had to focus now on Nazir. How do we know by Nazir that the Nazir is allowed to be Metamei to a Meis Mitzvah? So the Gemara said, by Nazir it says the same pasuk. It says Kol Yemei Azir L'Shem Al Nefesh Meis Lo Yavai. So we know he can't be metama to a mace. We have 4 extra words, L'Aviv, L'Imei, L'Achav, L'Achos. And the Gemara told us that from Kol Yemei Azir L'Shem Al Nefesh Meis Lo Yavai, we don't know if this means Kroivim or this only means Rechoikim. We don't know. By Kohen Gadol, we know it has to mean Kroivim because a Kohen Gadol already has the prohibition of a Kohen Hedjit under Rechoikim. But by the Nazir, we don't know what it means. So L'Aviv is the word that's used to teach us that he cannot even be metama to Kroivim. So that's what the word L'Aviv is used for. L'Ima is used for the Gzera Shava, according to Rabbi Shmuel. L'Achiv is used to tell us by a Nazir that he could be metama to a mitzvah, right? It was ended up being from L'Achiv. And L'Chayzoi is used to tell us that even if he's going to be to bring his carbon Pesach, even if he's going to bring his carbon Pesach and Mala his son, he could still be metama to a mitzvah. So it's telling you the higher stakes, even in the high stakes issue where you shouldn't become tamei, like it's going to violate your carbon Pesach, it's going to violate your Milah. I'm not sure why it will violate your Milah. Oh no, because if his son's a Norah, he can't bring his carbon Pesach. That's what it is. If his son's a Norah, he can't bring his carbon Pesach. So since the stakes are so high, you might think that he shouldn't be metame for Meis Mitzvah, even though you can be metame for Meis Mitzvah. That was the approach of Rabbi Shmuel. And a Nazir, correct. So that was how we learned the pasuk according to Rabbi Shmuel. According to Rabbi Kiva, by Nazir, none of the psukim are available to teach us Meis Mitzvah or anything. Because according to Rabbi Kiva, all 4 words, L'Aviv U'Le'imai, L'Achav U'La'chaisai, are all used to tell us, to build up the different levels. If he's only a Kohen Gadol, if he's a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir, if he's a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir, and he needs to bring a Korban Pesach, or if he's a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir and a Korban Pesach, and he needs to mal his child, you need all those 4 things to build that up. And there's a long brayso, I believe, in Yuma that actually lists off every case individually and uses each word to illustrate the extra build-up, the extra prohibition. So since Rabbi Kiva doesn't have any extra words, we need a makar by Nazir, that a Nazir can be metama to a mitzvah, and we need something extra here to be able to learn the halacha from Nazir to Mitzvah, from Nazir to Kohen Gadol, that a Kohen Gadol could be metama by touching a Mitzvah. How do we know that? So the Gemara says these are learned from logic. How do you know that a Nazir could be metama to a mitzvah? Well, that's going through this. I mean, the whole focus of the whole pasuk, according to Rabbi Kiva, is the Meis Mitzvah. But the question is, how did he know the Gzera Shava of Rebbe? So for that, Zok Tosfos, maybe there is no extra word by Nazir, but maybe there is an extra La'abavu Imoi by Kohen Gadol, because we already know that a Kohen Gadol could be metama to a Meis Mitzvah from the words in the pasuk by Nazir. Because the are used to build it up, even if he's a Kohen Gadol, right? Even if he's a Kohen and a Nazir, you know that mitzvah. So I no longer need a pasuk by Kohen Gadol to address the Kohen Gadol, because the pasuk by Nazir is already addressing the Kohen Gadol. So therefore, the la'aviv and the la'imai by the Kohen Gadol is extra, and the balt imai is extra. Only by Kohen Gadol, it's enough for Rabbi Kiva to be able to learn the Gzera Shava. Gebaltic. So now we have the whole sugya packaged. I'm not sure how that would work. Kohen Gadol got a haircut once a week. Every day. So I'm not sure how that works. I'm not sure. It's a good hour. Maybe the Gemara will discuss it later. We still have a whole bunch of hard blot coming up. We have another 20 blot. We're Memia. We have another 20 blot. So it's another, which is another almost a month. As Hashem, we're going to finish Nazir. Nazir was a very hard Masechta, and it was very hard for me because it says Stam Nazir is just 30 days. This difficult Nazir is going a lot more than 30 days. It's going to last 60 days. Yeah. Okay, shkoyach.